Hi, everyone. My name's Shahab. Thank you so much for the lovely talks. Ralph, I had a question for you specifically, and that was actually about dairy. So dairy at the moment, there seems to be like this very strong notion that we should have it 2 to 3 times per day. And the actual scientific evidence for the health benefits is not that well established. The water consumption for dairy is actually massive. So at a conservative level, to produce 1 liter of milk takes about 600 liters of water. So the average coffee drinker, including myself, has a huge impact on water. So I just wanted to know, how do you reconcile that, and what's your opinion on dairy?
Well, obviously, we didn't look at dairy specifically, but what you say makes complete sense. And actually, the proportion of fat in dairy is also quite high compared to the other macronutrients. So definitely the efficacy you have with dairy is not very good in that sense, right? And the other thing is that it actually you require the cow for it as well. And as we have seen, the beef industry is actually a great contributor to emissions in the global landscape. So maybe alternative dairy products, might be the context. But that again has some downsides as well, because alternative dairy products are highly processed so I'm not sure, but I don't know if Steve, you have a.
I'm just picking up on the idea, the idea of complete auditing of food systems. So the water impacts, the emissions impacts, the social impacts, et cetera, and relating that back to shifts in diet that might or might not improve health is a topic that Ralph's touched upon here. David Robenheimer and Manfred Lenzen at the Charles Perkins Center have really done sophisticated work anywhere in this. They won the Eureka Prize a couple of years ago. One of the lovely little examples that they provided was, if you ask the question by removing livestock production or reducing it, are you going to have an impact, not only improvement in health, but are you going to improve the environmental footprint of food production? And the answer was yes and no, and it depended entirely on what you replaced the animal foods with. And if you produce them with highly processed foods, you end up with the worst of every world. If you replace them with whole food, plant-derived foods, then you have a beneficial effect. So it's really crucial to take into account all of these things, have a complete audit of the various different costs. And then what you're essentially doing is optimizing multiple criteria to try and achieve an outcome that aligns as best you can health, environment, economics, social determinants, and so forth.
Any other questions? Nikhil?
Hi, Nikhil Patrawali, Gynae Consultant. Thank you for your talks. I have a question for you, Faraz, actually. Seems like a wonderful idea and so simple, yet I just noted that it's just so terribly bureaucratic, trying to implement anything as simple as that, and probably more common sense driven as opposed to anything. Where would you even start actually implementing it? At what level? Because I just feel it really needs to be at a high ministry level to get anything done, percolated in public sector.
So what this is regarding the paid exercise?
Paid exercise, yeah.
I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to ask you, because I certainly didn't ask you to shift your rooms around to make a mic drop moment. But let's start with this. I've been applying for grants for this to get an enhancement, and I'm getting 2 different feedbacks. So the research divisions consistently, and this is the feedback from the reviewers, this is too good a research idea. It does not need any more research, and it should already be happening.
Yep.
And then we go to the ministry to implement this, and and they're like, well, we need more research on cost effectiveness on implementation. My initial strategy was a ministry strategy, and I'm still going to be advocating for that. What I found remarkable is how quick private enterprise works. They've come up to me. I mean, the second real estate firm called me up and, you know, he knows me. So he said in his very Larrikin way, why are you helping my competitor? And well, they're phenomenal because they measure everything. They measure how many calls their agents make, how many successful, how many people get a deposit. And similar with the law firms who do 6-minute billings, they find there's a trail off because they all have expense cards after 2 p.m. Everyone just kind of dials it in. And we introduced a high intensity exercise circuit. So I'm actually hoping that the productivity data brings the ministry to the table. What can we do? Because, you know, I'm a director of our multimodality imaging service. So I've actually, in the cardiology department we've built an outdoor gym, the first of its kind in healthcare. Now, we got 50,000 for the funding. Apparently the sterilization's below and they can't drill into it. So we'll have to have different gym equipment, but we can do things locally. What we can also do is look at where our level of managerial license goes to and what can we do? Telling someone, listen, go have a 15-minute break, go for a walk, simple things like that. I think, you know, the ministry and governments are slow to react, but industry is fast. I think we can be fast and limber on our feet. And the smaller your organization, the easier it is for you to implement these changes. So if you're in, you know, I've got my cardiac rehab crew here, and if you guys were to do it, no one's going to be able to fault you on that. And the false dichotomy we create is by giving people a break, we say that they're going to be less productive. That's the false dichotomy because they're going to be more productive. So it is recognizing that, it's recognizing a happier, healthier workforce, and work has been done on this. PricewaterhouseCoopers looked at the impact of a health break, and they actually say that for every dollar you invest, you get $1.20 return on investment. Now, these are obviously model data, and it would be great to get a bit of grant funding to do this and prove it in an experimental, randomized way. But, you know, I think that's my answer. But Nikhil, the reason, you know, and Nikhil and I were having a conversation over coffee about environment. And he's one of the leading fertility specialists. And he said something about fertility. So just now that you're here, I'm going to be opportunistic.
I've been put on a spot for my question. But
the environment, climate change, things like microplastics, what are they doing to fertility? Because it is one of the questions of our time.
Sure. I think it's very pertinent, and probably there's a lot of data out there. Over the last 50 years, in particularly, one of the fertility assessments, which is very easy to conduct, is on men. So a lot of data is on men as opposed to women, where the sperm, all the parameters of sperm have been very well proven to fall over 50 years by even 40%. So the whole fertile range has dropped by 40% in men. So that humanity doesn't panic, the World Health Organization always keeps shifting its goalposts with what is normal range. So, so what has occurred now, if you compare if you go through deeply into the World Health Organization reference ranges, you'd notice that the reference ranges were very different. And if you compared something from the 1960s, 70s to now, you'd find a huge difference in what is normal. It is getting into us. It is getting into us mostly through all the microplastics that are coming through our oceans, for example. That's the biggest. The H2O is the biggest sort of driver in our bodies. It is and you'd see the data all over as well with fertility. The fertility per se in all the couples has dropped over the last 40 years, more so in first world countries because we are the biggest sort of consumers of plastics and all the other reusable items, including in our theaters and so on. So I think it's very pertinent, and hence probably I'm trying to come in and out of this conference as well because it is really close to my heart with what I deal with. Combined with everything else that's happening in society, we're all getting older, pushing our pregnancies a little bit further up with careers and so on. But diet, all the other environmental factors, exercise, all of this is really, really important. But plastics are really big. Pollution is very big as well.
It's a sobering point. And I was actually looking for a microplastics academic. So, I said I was looking for an academic in microplastics, research fund, 55 BDIs. I hope some people get that reference. The rest of you look up man in finance meme. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, hi, thanks everyone. My name's Michael Peake. Just changing subject about exercise. I mean, I just wondering what your thoughts are on organised sports. I mean, when I was young at school, everyone had to play sport no matter what. You just had to go and do it, and which I enjoyed. And then was more than just the exercise. I guess it was the social interaction and things like that. I guess what's happened over the years, a lot of people give up sport when they leave school, and that's the end of organised sport. I find things doing like, say, exercise breaks or personal exercise programs pretty boring because you're there by yourself. I mean, and even nowadays, I'm just thinking for the people out at Western Sydney. I've lived out here for quite a while. I've still got 2 girls over 30 who still go play netball at Jamison Park on Saturdays in the middle of winter. And I find that a good place, an example of the whole family actually goes to watch and everyone gets to exercise. I just wanting your thoughts on, should we be promoting more organised sport for longer in life as a simple thing to do, because that was done in the past?
Michael, probably a few comments on that. I love organised sport. I participate in organised sport. The challenge is, I mean, if we look at the organised sport culture, one of the places that has really got it right and is doing well is the United States. Their college football programs, their sports programs, yet we still see levels of obesity. And the work with one of our collaborators, Emmanuel Stamatakis, has looked at this, is whatever we've done, about 25% of the population regularly exercises, other people don't. So I think for those that do organize sports, finding that margin where, you know, they are going to drop off and reintegrating them is important. But I suspect that we were going to miss a huge amount of people who were never part of organized sport for whatever reason, whether it was social, whether that just was not their thing. So I think if we're going to be inclusive, I do think we need to maximize where we are. And there's a whole element of organized sports to improve health promotion as well. And I work with someone at Western Sydney University where we're trying to do this, is getting dads healthier at their kids' soccer games and mums healthier as well. But is to recognize that there are people in society who won't be doing that, or organized sports is not their thing. And giving them opportunities to work. What we found at Nepean was the staff that were exercising became friends, and then they were going for the connection. So once you get people moving, once you get the release of the endorphins, you build a community as well. But yeah, Kath, Steve, Ralph.
I'm going to pick up and deliver the question immediately to Kath, because it's really relevant. You mentioned Manos, and you mentioned Manos Stamatakis, who leads the physical activity theme at Charles Perkins Centre. Manos has published a series of extraordinary papers over the last couple of years where they've taken the wearable device data from the UK Biobank population, which is 500,000 people followed prospectively over more than a decade. And it's the standard population study anywhere. And they asked the question, given, as Faraz said, 80% of people don't exercise virtually at all, what's the minimum amount and type of exercise that's required to get a substantial benefit? And in many cases, people physically aren't able to exercise, not only because they don't have the opportunity, but physically they're unable to. And Kath will speak to this, I'm sure. And the answer was 3 one-minute periods in a day of incidental activity involving walking up some stairs, carrying the shopping, walking the dog, returns something like a 30 or 40% benefit in terms of reduced all-cause mortality, cardiovascular risk, and so forth. So if you ask the question a different way, how little do you need to do to gain benefit? That becomes much more accessible. It becomes accessible to everybody. And it's a different way than saying you should do 10,000 steps, and if you don't, you're somehow failing and bad. It's looking at it the other way around. And I think, Kath, that's probably most relevant to your populations.
Yes, thanks, Steve. I think just sort of reflecting on what everything's been said, I think we tend to step away from talking about exercise and we talk about physical activity, and it has to be natural. It has to be part of that person's day-to-day. So, you know, I guess when I reflect on my move out to Greater Western Sydney, and I've certainly got less healthy over the time, it's because I've become car dependent. I've now got a long commute. And I'm tired, and I suppose and I sit at my desk all day, whereas in the old days I was an intern on my feet all the day, walking to work, walking to the childcare. You know, I was doing an awful lot of incidental physical activity. So how can we actually, rather than thinking about formalized exercise breaks, how can we build in that day-to-day lack of trying to get rid of the sedentary activity rather than necessarily forcing physical activity? And I think that's another part of this. So, you know, having those formal exercise breaks is great, and that's really important for our health, but getting on our feet regularly, and we should all be on the land, you know, as you said, to, you know, growing crops and things like that, and being physically active, and sort of making that every day, using the stairs rather than lifts. You know, how do we make that normal? And in Western Sydney, it's not normal. You go downstairs, you get in your car, you expect to park right outside where you're going. Whereas in Europe or somewhere like that, it's quite normal to walk for half an hour to get to work and catch public transport and things like that. So we really need to think about system-wide change to make physical activity normal. Yeah.
Can I make a comment too? I mean, what we're doing here is we're providing additional evidence for things which are actually commonplaces. You know, eat healthy, lose weight or maintain a healthy weight, and do exercise. And we're providing more and more evidence, and we're preaching to the converted. I think, you know, everyone in this room gets it, that we have to do these things. But from a solutions domain perspective, you know, are these pieces of evidence we're providing really reaching the vulnerable groups in society who need to make these changes most? And are there not so many other conflicting things going on in their lives where, you know, promising them another 2 years of their life or so is not going to reach them really in any tangible way? And I just want to bring this up as a attention of what we are doing and what actually the solutions can be, and if we don't have to have a different approach to the solutions. And being prescriptive is definitely not a solution.
Ralph, I agree with you that being prescriptive is not a solution. And often when we speak from our level of privilege where, you know, I have a job, I've got a good life, and I want to exercise more, but I work too many hours, so please give me a free exercise break. But that's not an insignificant portion of society, because I guess the first thing is, are the people that are wanting to be healthier able to be healthier? And I think by design, we've engineered a society that doesn't allow that. And I think work is a part of it. I think when I used to watch TV, if there was a cliffhanger episode, you'd have to wait till the next week. Now Netflix says 5, 4, 3, 2, and I end up watching 3 episodes instead. I should know better. And then food, right? Pizza was the only thing that could be delivered. Now I ordered butter chicken last night. My point being that we have, by design, traded off convenience for movement, for purpose. So I guess the first thing is the people that want to be healthy, how can we get them healthy? And then your point, which is then there's going to be a whole section of society that we do need to pull on board. And I think their incentives have to play a role. You know, Thomas, and this is something, Kim, you ran the segment on heat. Yeah.
So when you build communities, you need to have the social infrastructure. So when I say, I'll give where I work, which is Riverstone Family Medical Practice. Next to the practice, we have the community pool. Behind the practice, we have the workers' club. Behind that, we have the community garden. Next to that, we have the men's shed. And next to that, we have the local preschool. So when I do social prescribing, I send my over 65 men to the men's shed. In the men's shed, they repair bikes and everything else, but they also work on the community garden. We have my patients who are living in isolation, I send them to the community garden. Kids go to preschool, the mothers go to the community garden. So when we build communities, we need to have the social infrastructure in place for communities to actually remove the barriers for people to be more active. I have a lot of patients who walk to the surgery because they live locally, which made it really hard during the bushfires and the heat waves. It's having our policymakers have the imagination to see that it is possible for them to do positive things with planning, because there are examples around to be able to accomplish this.
So I guess picking up on your point, at the conference you ran, it was in May, about building. You know, perhaps I'm a real cynic, but I think incentives drive a lot of behavior. We've got a house, I don't know how many 100,000 people that are coming into New South Wales every year, and we have a clear incentive in the room. So we talked about apartments which have McDonald's at the bottom of it. It is up to the state and the federal governments to look at tax incentives. How about we incentivize and allow people to negatively gear apartments, buildings which are conducive to physical activity, which are mindful of the environment and have a minimal standard for renters, right? And you can build out stuff, but the investors are not going to get the tax benefits from it. There are creative policy solutions which can be enacted, which still give those with capital and ability to allocate capital and do whatever they want, but also are to the betterment of our society and our community. And I think that's, to your point, Ralph, is a conference such as this, we need to feed back to our representatives to say there are solutions, there are out-of-the-box ideas, break glass in case of emergency ideas that we need to enact. Otherwise, we'll have another conference in about 20 years talking about the same issues.
Faraz, just to pick up on your point, I think it's personalised medicine or personalised approaches. So we do have the need to incentivise people who are able to take on those health messages. But to Ralph's point, actually going to a recent conference, I was at for diabetes, when they're addressing some health in communities at risk, they actually embedding a supermarket in that community or doing something like you're speaking, putting in a key infrastructure actually will have more impact than directly approaching individuals. So I think we need to think about this from both angles, where we're actually incentivising, for example, access to fruit and veg and things like that in these communities at risk, and then we're also approaching that want to improve their health. So it's not either or. It's
really expensive. Healthy food is really expensive and needs to be subsidized. Your Big Mac meal where you can go large is cheaper than a salad. This is a massive problem, and we need to reverse that balance, and that has to be done through financial incentives. So we've got a question.
I have a household of boys who I think they're bodybuilders and are very much on the high protein diet and no carbs. So I'm just interested in Kath and Ralph's argument against that. And I'm talking about a healthy diet that's lots of vegetables and protein and no pastas and breads and rice and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the myth about high protein diets being good for bodybuilders and for humanity as such is I think, really a myth. We don't need as much proteins as the industry makers believe we need. And it's a huge billion-dollar market, especially in the bodybuilding space. I don't think there's any evidence for that really, truly, that it, leads to more muscle mass. And quite frankly, the high protein myth has also been carried towards infant feeding and infant formulas. And, here at the Charles Perkins Center, where, Steve has conceptualized the protein leverage hypothesis, what we're doing is we're programming with high protein diets, probably, especially in early infancy. We are programming children towards obesity because their protein targets are going to be elevated. And that would mean that they have to eat more carbohydrates and fats to reach that protein target, and virtually programming them to obesity. That's definitely something which could well account for some of the obesity epidemics we see.
Now, eat like the animals. You need to read Eat Like the Animals. I think a crucial thing is when you're anabolic and you're building muscle and you're young and you're physically active, you do need a little bit more protein, that's true. And the risk is that when you stop doing those things and you become more settled, you get a job, you stop doing organized sport, you have a family, you have many other commitments. Then if you retain that high protein requirement that's been trained during that period of anabolic high level intensity exercise, it does risk higher rates of obesity thereafter. So if you look at the decade during which obesity rates are going up most quickly, it's in that period from 18 to 30 that the real damage gets done, or in childhood, right, as Kat said, right from the beginning. So it's great providing that level of physical activity is maintained and the healthy diet is maintained and the protein is sort of dialed down when the boys become less active than they are now. I guess that would be my... Anyway, we're running out of time. We've been told to stop, so we've got one last question.
Oh, I sneak in again. It's so interesting, this conversation, because I always like thinking about myself as like a hunter-gatherer when I need to come down to like these primal instincts. And I feel like we're at a point in our life and time and space that we're so scared of difficulties and being uncomfortable. Thinking about how Kellogg's has now somehow made breakfast the most important meal from that marketing from like 30 years ago. Is still with us. But I had a question for you guys with that. Do you think there is something there that we're all kind of scared of being uncomfortable, like exercising or making our own meals or growing our own vegetables? But another part of the question was, if you had a magic wand, what would each of you do to make a healthier society?
My one's easy. I'd pay everyone to exercise at work.
Yeah, you go.
Just trying to think of that last bit. What I do, I think I'd address social inequity is what I do. And the first thing, yes, I think one of the big things that we work with people, because we're sort of a rehab service for severe obesity, and we teach distress intolerance. So there is a lot, people don't are anxious about being hungry, anxious about physical activity. It's just a gradual exposure to those things and teaching them that it's okay. Yeah.
Well, Ralph?
Well, as I said, one of the key things here is, eat real food, mostly plants and not too much would be my sort of bumper sticker recommendation, which is not entirely from me, actually.
No, Michael Pollan may have some other thoughts on that one, but look, a corollary of that, don't outsource your nutrition to commercial interests, because they do not have your health as a priority.
Eat less, move more, love and community.